The Galactic Assembly Nexus hovered in the dead silence of space, a colossal ring of metal and light circling the corpse of a long-dead star. Ships from every corner of the galaxy drifted around it, each carrying delegates, diplomats, and soldiers from over 200 species. It was a place built for peace, but soaked in quiet power struggles. Deals were made in shadowed corners. Wars were prevented or prepared with a word. And in one of its vast chambers, a single seat often sat empty, forgotten by most, avoided by many. It was the seat of Earth. Captain Alex Voss stepped off his shuttle and into the grand hall of the Nexus. He moved with the ease of someone used to being watched, but rarely welcomed. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in the black and gray of the human diplomatic corps, he carried himself like a man who once commanded fleets, but now only carried papers. His dark eyes scanned the crowd as his boots clicked softly against polished floors of alien alloys. No one greeted him. No species offered a handshake or tentacle. A few glanced his way, some curious, others indifferent, and more than a few amused. The humans had arrived again, always polite, always late to speak, always quick to compromise. In a hall of roaring predators, humanity had become the silent herbivore. Harmless, forgettable. Voss made his way to Earth's delegate's seat. It stood alone near the back of the assembly floor, half-shadowed, surrounded by gaps where allies might have once sat, if humanity had any left. The chair itself was standard issue, high-backed, with translation tech and voting inputs. Dust had settled into its edges. Voss sat quietly, folding his hands over his lap, listening as the session began. The speaker, a gelatinous being from the AR Thal hive mind, called the assembly to order. Its voice was filtered through a translator, flat, robotic, and cold. Today's motion, Proposal 943, the reallocation of defense responsibilities for the Sol region. Voss didn't react outwardly, but inside something stirred. That was Earth. The Sol region was his home, and reallocation was a polite way of saying, you can't protect yourselves anymore. Let others do it for you. He watched as the other representatives began to speak. The Syndral Dominion, sharp-scaled and power-hungry, supported the motion without hesitation. So did the Zolari combine, with their shifting forms and silver masks. More followed. Most didn't even say humanity's name. They just spoke of efficiency, unity, galactic safety, all code words. Captain Alex Voss said nothing. Not yet. Across the chamber, Ambassador Threxjal of the Syndral Dominion took the floor. He walked like a man who knew the path was already cleared. His voice, deep and smooth, filled the hall. It is not weakness to protect those who cannot protect themselves, Threx said. The humans have shown admirable restraint for centuries. But restraint is not strength. It is time we offer them relief from the burdens of military responsibility. Let them focus on culture, on art, on peace. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. Threx's eyes slid briefly to Voss. A smirk touched his scaled lips. It was the kind of look a man gave a museum relic, respected but irrelevant. Voss returned the gaze with silence. He could have spoken then. He could have reminded them of the Terran wars, of the ships humanity had built, the battles they had fought, the peace they had bought with blood and brilliance. But no one here cared about the past. They had seen humans step back from power, and assumed it meant they had none left. The session continued. Words rose and fell like tides. Voss listened, said nothing, took notes. He watched who nodded, who hesitated, who smiled when Earth was dismissed. Patterns began to form in his mind, like stars arranging into constellations. He understood this game, but he also remembered another game, played in war rooms and battlefields. One where silence was not surrender. It was waiting. When the session ended, the hall emptied slowly. Delegates returned to their private quarters or lounge areas, discussing strategies and upcoming votes. Threx passed close by Voss's seat, pausing just long enough to drop a single sentence in a low voice. Perhaps next time, Captain, send an artist. Not a soldier. Voss didn't move, didn't respond. He watched the Syndral walk away, confident, certain. Then slowly he stood. He turned to look out across the empty seats. The forgotten ones. The avoided ones. And he smiled. The halls of the Galactic Assembly Nexus were never truly silent. Even in the late cycles, when most delegates returned to their chambers, the station hummed with low voices, quiet footsteps, and the soft pulse of artificial gravity systems. Politics never slept. Not here. And neither did Captain Alex Voss. He walked with purpose through a side corridor near the main delegate wing. His official session notes were tucked under one arm, though he wasn't reading them. He was listening, watching, calculating. The Syndrel had made their move today with bold confidence. Too confident. Voss had spent enough of his life in war to know what that meant. Plans were already in motion. He turned a corner into a darker hall, lined with tall panels displaying rotating star maps and trade routes. A group of diplomats from the Zolari Combine stood nearby, their silver masks shimmering as they spoke in soft, rippling voices. Voss slowed his steps, pretending to study a map of the Eridanus trade spine. Signed 2 days ago, one Zolari whispered. Final vote will only seal it. The humans won't know until it's done, said another. Threx secured the signatories. Even the Viren agreed, under pressure. They won't resist. They never do. Voss didn't flinch. He absorbed every word. Then, just as quietly, he continued past them, turning down another corridor until he was alone again. It was worse than he thought. The proposal wasn't just a political idea. It was already being finalized behind closed doors. A signed agreement among key species. The vote would only be a formality. The plan was simple. Strip Earth of its autonomous defense rights, assign control to a protective council, and limit humanity's presence in exploration sectors. All under the excuse of regional stability. In short, Earth would become a galactic ward, a protectorate. Voss made his way to the human diplomatic quarters. The halls here were smaller, older. No guards stood outside. No aides buzzed around. Humanity had only a small delegation now. Just Voss, a part-time historian, and a cultural liaison more interested in poetry than policy. He entered his private chamber, sealed the door, and sat at the desk. The lights dimmed to his presence, and a soft blue glow filled the room. He activated his secure console, linked to Earth's Central Diplomatic Command. A familiar face appeared, Director Lin, head of Earth's External Affairs. She was older than him by 2 decades, hair silver, eyes sharp behind the calm expression she always wore. Captain Voss, she said. Report. Voss gave it to her straight. It's more than a proposal. Threx already has support. A written agreement between the Syndrel, Zolari, Viren, and at least 3 other powers. The vote will pass unless something changes. Director Lin's calm cracked just slightly. How certain are you? I overheard Zolari diplomats confirming it. This isn't speculation. It's in motion. She exhaled softly. This could trigger a crisis. Yes, Voss said, or it could cement our status as a second-rate species. Maybe permanently. Lin looked down, then back at him. Earth doesn't want a confrontation, Alex. We've come too far building peace. I understand that. But they're taking our strength, not because we're dangerous, but because they think we won't fight for it. There was a pause. We chose restraint, Lin said. We didn't want another war. And they chose to mistake it for weakness, Voss replied. Another long silence passed between them. Finally, Lin gave a short nod. You are authorized to observe, document, and speak in defense. But do not escalate. Not yet. Voss closed the connection. He sat back, staring at the ceiling. The stars projected across the room shifted slowly, charting constellations from Earth's sky. They seemed so distant now. Just symbols. Just memories. He stood and crossed to the wall where his old fleet uniform hung behind glass. The stripes on the shoulder were faded, but the insignia still gleamed, a sword crossed with a torch. Peace, through readiness. He didn't touch it. Not yet, but he stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Voss returned to the assembly. This time he walked slower. He watched who whispered in corners, who avoided his eyes, who smiled too quickly. Patterns sharpened. He noticed something else too. Fear. Not of him. Not yet. But fear of what he might do. Of what humans might do if they ever stopped being quiet. Voss returned to Earth's seat. He placed his hands on the table. The vote was still days away. There was time, but not much. The galactic assembly floor was quieter than usual. Not silent. Nothing was ever silent at the Nexus, but quieter. Whispers didn't float as freely. Delegates walked in pairs instead of clusters. Something had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. Captain Alex Voss noticed at the moment he stepped into the chamber. He walked to Earth's seat without hesitation, nodding slightly at those who met his eyes. Fewer looked away now. Some watched him with mild curiosity, others with caution, one or two with a trace of wariness. The silence of humanity was no longer being taken for granted. The change had begun, not through force, but through presence. As he sat, he noticed Ambassador Threxjal speaking quietly with a group of smaller species. They formed a half-circle around him like moons to a planet. When Threx saw Voss, he gave a small, patronizing smile, then continued his discussion as if the human had already been dismissed. Voss leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. He wasn't here to react. He was here to set the pace. A bell chimed. The session was about to begin. Delegates took their seats. The speaker's voice, filtered through dozens of translators, announced the order of the day. Preliminary arguments regarding Proposal 943. Voss pressed the button on his desk. His name lit up in the queue to speak. He wasn't first. That honor went to a delegate from the Zalari Combine, who spoke with flowing, elegant phrases about shared burden and the safety of galactic peace. When Voss's turn came, he stood slowly. The room did not quiet completely, but the change was noticeable. Conversations lowered. Heads turned. He placed both hands on the desk before him. "I am Captain Alex Voss," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I represent Earth, and I oppose Proposal 943. A few scoffs, a few quiet laughs. Voss didn't flinch. "You say this proposal is about protection, about stability, about helping a species that has stepped away from war. But what you really mean, what you won't say, is that you think humans are too weak to matter anymore." Now the room was still. Even Threx looked up. "For 200 years, humanity has chosen peace," Voss continued. "Not because we lack the ability to fight, but because we know the cost. We've fought wars that left planets burning. We've lost billions. We've survived our darkest hours and came back stronger." He looked slowly around the chamber, locking eyes with anyone who would meet his gaze. "But every time we've stepped back, we've been met with pressure, restrictions, dismissal. You've mistaken patience for surrender. That mistake ends today." There was no applause, no shouts, just silence. Voss sat down. A pause followed, long enough to feel heavy. Then the next speaker rose, a delegate from the Viren Coalition. They hesitated slightly before they began. The shift was small but real. Voss had drawn a line, not with threats, not with weapons, with words and the quiet force behind them. Later in the corridors, Voss was approached by an unlikely figure, Counselor Rhea Tovan of the Valari Union. A tall, amphibious species, the Valari were known for neutrality and silence in most conflicts. "I listened to your speech," she said. Voss nodded politely. "And you spoke like a man who hasn't forgotten how to command." Voss smiled faintly. "Maybe I haven't." Tovan tilted her head. "The Syndrel won't take this lightly. Be careful." "I'm counting on that," he said. She left without another word. Back in his quarters, Voss reviewed the voting lineup again. Threx still had the numbers. Barely, but some delegates had shifted their tone. Some had pulled their support quietly. The cracks were forming. That night, he opened an old file on his console, a contact list from his fleet days. Trusted names, old friends. Not all were still in service, but some were. Some owed him favors. Others simply shared his concern. He didn't send any messages yet, but he drafted them. Not for war, not yet, but for readiness. Because he knew what Threx would do next. The Syndrel didn't tolerate resistance, and Voss had just made himself visible. He was no longer the forgotten envoy from a silent planet. He was now a threat. The next session of the Galactic Assembly felt different. Captain Alex Voss sensed it as soon as he stepped into the chamber. Delegates no longer ignored him. Some nodded as he passed. A few gave him space, stepping aside in the corridors, watching him the way one watches a thundercloud, not yet storming, but capable of turning. Ambassador Threxjal stood across the chamber, speaking with delegates from the Viren and Zolari. He spoke calmly, but his gestures were sharper than before. His eyes flicked toward Voss more than once. Something in the room had changed, and Threx knew it. The proposal, 943, was still on the table. The vote hadn't happened yet, but the debate was shifting. Quietly, slowly, the balance was tipping. When the speaker called the session to order, a line of representatives rose to speak. Some repeated their support for the motion, careful and rehearsed. Others, for the first time, asked questions. Real questions. What protections are in place for human sovereignty? Who holds authority if Earth disagrees with the Protective Council? Why now? Why this urgency? Voss listened carefully. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He waited. When his name was called again, he stood with calm confidence. 2 days ago, Voss said, I sat in this chamber and watched a species talk about Earth as if it were a failing colony. I listened to justifications dressed as kindness. But you don't offer protection to the strong. You impose it on those you believe cannot defend themselves. He paused. Silence met him. I ask this assembly to remember history. Not just ours, yours too. Every species here rose from struggle. You all fought for recognition. You earned your place. Voss raised a small device and placed it on the desk. A light blinked, and the room dimmed slightly as a projection appeared. Footage from old Earth military files. Fleets rising from Earth's orbit, battleships forming defensive lines in space, humanitarian drops during the Terran rebuilding. A history most of the galaxy had chosen to forget. This is who we are, Voss said. We didn't disappear. We stepped back because we believed peace was possible. But peace is not the absence of power. It is the choice to use it wisely. The projection faded. Voss looked across the room. I'm not asking for special treatment. I am demanding respect. Earth will not accept guardianship. We are not children. We are not weak. And we will not be silenced. He sat down. This time, there were no whispers. No scoffs. Only silence. Even Threx remained seated, unmoving. Later that cycle, Voss returned to his quarters. He wasn't alone long. A message blinked on his console. Secure channel. From Counselor Tovin of the Valari Union. We are reconsidering our vote, the message read. There is strength in restraint. We see that now. Voss allowed himself a single breath of relief. He wasn't winning, not yet. But he was no longer standing alone. That evening, he met quietly with delegates from 3 minor species. They were nervous, but curious. Why now, one asked. Why push back after all these years? Voss looked him in the eyes. Because there's a line, and they just crossed it. In the darkness of his chamber, Voss reviewed the list of votes. 4 had shifted. 5 were undecided. The rest still leaned toward Threx. But the gap was closing. The next session would be the last before the vote. Voss knew Threx wouldn't let it end quietly. He also knew something else. They had underestimated humanity for too long. And now, the voice of the quiet had become impossible to ignore. The assembly chamber pulsed with tension. Delegates arrived earlier than usual, dressed in ceremonial robes, armor, or polished suits, each representing their world, their people, and their position in the galactic order. Conversations were hushed but urgent. Everyone knew what today was. The final debate. The last chance before the vote on Proposal 943. Captain Alex Voss entered with slow, measured steps. His uniform was crisp, simple, gray and black, bearing only the emblem of Earth's diplomatic corps and the single silver bar of a captain's rank. He wore no medals, no weapon, no visible symbol of power. But today he did not need any of those. As he walked to Earth's seat, eyes followed him. No one whispered. No one laughed. Delegates from at least 7 species nodded respectfully. Even the AR Thalhive delegates blinked in acknowledgement, and they rarely acknowledged individuals at all. Voss sat down and waited. Across the chamber, Ambassador Threxjal stood from his place with all the confidence of a man who believed the outcome was still his to control. He stepped forward, taking the speaking platform with ease. The speaker granted him the floor without question. Threx smiled as he began. Members of the Assembly, he said smoothly, I rise not to attack the humans, but to remind you of what this proposal truly means. He moved slowly, hands behind his back. We live in an era of peace, one where instability is dangerous not just to one world, but to all. Earth, while once a powerful actor, has not maintained active defense capabilities in decades. Their fleets are inactive, their technology outdated. They cannot enforce their own borders. This proposal ensures their safety and ours. He paused to let the words sink in. This is not punishment. It is protection. It is the responsible thing to do. For them, and for us all. There was polite nodding from a few corners of the room. Voss didn't move. His eyes were locked on Threx. Then the speaker called his name. Voss stood slowly. He walked to the central floor. His voice, calm and even, filled the chamber. Ambassador Threx, he said, you claim this is about responsibility. You speak of safety, but your words hide something else. Control. Murmurs began around the edges of the chamber. You say Earth has no fleets, no defenses, but that's not true. We stood down by choice. We believed the galaxy wanted peace, so we gave peace a chance, and you've used that chance to weaken us. Politically, economically, strategically. He reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a thin device, barely larger than a card. With a tap, a projection flickered to life above the center floor. Images appeared, documents, communications, time-stamped and signed. A copy of the secret agreement between the Syndral Dominion, the Zalari Combine, the Viren Coalition, and others. The plan to make Earth a protectorate, signed weeks before the proposal had even been announced. The chamber erupted. Delegates stood, shouted, demanded explanations. Accusations flew. Some denied involvement. Others looked away. The Zalari delegates' mask cracked slightly at the edge, metal flexing from pressure. Threx's face hardened. His mask of calm slipped. This is a violation of diplomatic conduct, he barked. No, Basriplaith. This is the truth, and it was always going to come out. He turned slowly to face the chamber. Earth does not need your protection. We need your respect. And if you still think we are helpless, I invite you to look outside. He tapped his device again. A live feed appeared, taken from external Nexus cameras. It showed several human ships, silent, stationary, and fully armed, holding position at a respectful distance from the station. They had arrived quietly. No weapons drawn. No threats made. Just presence. A reminder. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Voss spoke one last time. We came here to be equals, to contribute, to grow together. But if you insist on treating us as something less, we will leave this assembly and stand alone. And we will not be the ones who regret it. He returned to his seat. No one spoke for a long time. The speaker called for a recess. Delegates poured out into the halls in chaos. Some shouted. Some argued. A few came to Voss in private, offering apologies, support, or fear-thin smiles. Voss didn't need to hear their words. He had already made his point. The mask had fallen. Threx's power was no longer absolute. The vote was coming. And now, the choice would not be between safety and chaos. It would be between justice and humiliation. The chamber was full. Every seat occupied. Every screen active. News of the exposed agreement had spread across the Nexus like wildfire. By the next rotation, it was not only the Assembly who knew what had happened. Every species with a presence on the station was watching. And not just from curiosity, from fear. Captain Alex Voss stood at the window in his quarters, watching Earth's ships in the distance. They held their position calmly. No weapons drawn, no hostile movement. Just quiet proof that humanity still remembered how to command the void. They were not here to fight, but they were ready. The knock came just before the vote. He opened the door. It was Counselor Tovin of the Valari Union. You've made the chamber nervous, she said. Voss nodded once. Good. Fear makes people careful. She studied him. And what do you want them to feel when the vote is over? He looked her in the eye. Respect. She left without another word. Voss arrived in the chamber with steady steps. Threx was already seated, his expression unreadable. The ambassador hadn't spoken to the press, hadn't released a statement. But Voss knew what he was doing, waiting, calculating, hoping enough allies would stay loyal out of habit or fear. The speaker took the floor. Today, we cast final votes on Proposal 943. Before voting begins, each side may speak one last time. Threx rose. His voice was steady, but the edge was gone. The authority he once carried had thinned. "I have nothing to hide," he said. "What was revealed was part of a plan. Yes, a plan to ensure peace and security. If we have erred in process, we apologize. But the need remains. Earth has not participated in active defense for over a century. We must not forget the lessons of history." Then he sat. Voss stood slowly. "For centuries," he said, "we've held back. We watched the galaxy recover from its wars. We chose diplomacy over dominance. We believed peace was stronger than fear." He stepped forward toward the center of the chamber. "And what did we get in return? Closed doors, silenced votes, and now a signed agreement to take our independence away, without our voice, without our consent." He looked around the room, eyes moving from delegate to delegate. "I'm not here to ask. I'm here to remind you. We are not weak. We are not gone. And we are not afraid." He raised his hand, signaled the projection feed. The screen behind him lit up again. This time, not a recording, but a live transmission from the captain of the Earth fleet. "We await your orders, sir," the captain said through the feed. "No action unless provoked. Standing by." Voss lowered his hand. "We do not threaten. We do not intimidate. But we are done being ignored." Silence held the chamber for a full minute. Then the vote began. Names flashed across the central screen, one by one. Each delegate cast their vote through biometric inputs. Green for approval, red for denial. The colors began to appear. Green, green, red, green, red, red, red. The tally shifted. Voss watched without blinking. The screen filled slowly, color by color, until finally, the result. Proposal 943, rejected. The chamber didn't cheer. No applause came. It was too heavy for that. Too serious. But heads turned toward Voss, and none turned away in dismissal. Across the room, Threx stood slowly. He didn't speak. He gave Voss a long, steady look. For the first time since they met, it held no smugness. No superiority. Only recognition. After the session, as delegates filed out in silence, Voss remained seated. He looked once more at the seed of Earth. No longer dusty, no longer forgotten. Tovin passed him on her way out. She paused. "They see you now," she said. "They needed to," Voss replied. She nodded once. "And if they forget?" He stood and looked at the sky through the chamber's dome, where Earth's ships still held formation, silent and steady. "They won't." The Nexus was quiet in the days following the vote. Not empty. No, the Galactic Assembly never truly slept, but quiet in a different way. Delegates moved more carefully. Conversations became more private. Eyes that once skimmed past the human envoy now paused, watched, and measured. Captain Alex Voss moved through the station not with pride, but with purpose. He did not celebrate. There was no victory parade, no flag raised in triumph. The rejection of Proposal 943 was not a win for Earth alone. It was a message, and messages like that were meant to echo, calm, clear, and lasting. In the assembly chamber, the human seat was no longer in shadow. More surprising than anything was the change in the air. Species who had once dismissed humanity now approached with nods and greetings. Some offered quiet words of respect. Others offered cautionary congratulations, spoken carefully, like acknowledging a sleeping predator that had opened one eye. Voss returned, most with calm acknowledgement. He had no interest in praise, only progress. On the third day after the vote, a private meeting was called. Small, select, no public records. Among those present, representatives from the Valari Union, the Arthal Hive, the Draven Ascendancy, and several others who had voted against the proposal after Voss's speech. They met in a simple room. No lorams, no varths, just chairs and quiet voices. Counselor Tovin of the Valari spoke first. "You didn't just change minds," she said. "You changed expectations." Voss didn't answer right away. He waited, let her finish. "The assembly needs balance," she continued. It needs strength that isn't born of fear. You reminded us of that. Some of us had forgotten. Another delegate, a Dravan with crystalline skin and deep-set eyes, added, there are murmurs now of re-evaluating Earth's role. Full voting power, independent defense rights, a possible position on the Security Council. Voss folded his hands. We don't need a seat to matter. No, Tovin said, but now they'll ask you to take one. Voss said nothing to that. Not yet. He returned to his quarters that evening and looked once more at the old uniform hanging behind the glass. Then he turned and walked to his console. A single message awaited him. This one from Earth. From Director Lin. We watched everything. The assembly is different now. So is our place in it. And that is because of you. She ended with a simple line. Come home when you're ready. Or stay. You've earned your voice. Voss closed the message and stood at the window. The Earth fleet had left quietly 2 rotations earlier. No announcement. No display. Just a silent departure. Same as their arrival. That, too, was a message. The galaxy would remember the day humanity spoke not with weapons, but with truth. Not with rage, but with resolve. And it would remember the man who reminded them what Earth was capable of. Back in the assembly chamber, the seat marked for Earth was clean now, polished. It caught the light when Voss passed by. He paused, looked at it. Then he turned and left. There would be other proposals. Other battles. The game of politics never ended. But now, humanity no longer played from the edge of the board. They were seen, and they would not be forgotten again.